Good morning. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. This chapter, Paul gives us a warning from Israel's history. They had been freed from Egypt. They had gone through the Red Sea. They passed right through it, a mighty deliverance of God, and his cloud led them by day, and that was amazing. And yet, most of them died in the wilderness. God wasn't pleased with them because of their idolatry. They committed sexual immorality. They tested the Lord. They grumbled, and God was not pleased with them. And Paul emphasizes these things happened to them and were recorded for us as a warning, as an example. There's no temptation that comes our way that isn't common to man, and God will help us have victory over. Remember people and their story from the Old Testament and how they fell, and not to be too puffed up and proud, but to look for God's way of escape. He goes on to say, really, don't have anything to do with idols. Don't eat the meat that's offered to idols. He's like, the meat is nothing, but I just don't want you to have a communion with demons. Are you trying to make God jealous? He's the one and only God. He quotes again, he harks back to chapter 6 about the quote they would say, oh, everything's lawful for me, everything's permissible in their culture. And he again says, yeah, you might say everything's permissible for you, but it's really not beneficial to you. It's really not constructive. Don't get involved in idolatry. And he says, meat offered to idols, it's not a big deal. You could eat that. It's only meat. But if somebody comes to you and is testing you and, hey, this meat was offered to idols, are you going to eat this? He says, then no. Then don't eat it then for that sake. He says, why should my freedom be judged by another's conscience? And so whatever you do, eat or drink or anything, just do it for the glory of God. And 1 Corinthians chapter 10. For I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers, that our forefathers were all under the cloud, and that they all passed the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them. Their bodies were scattered over the desert. Now these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in pagan revelry. We should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 of them died. We should not test the Lord, as some of them did, and were killed by snakes. And do not grumble, as some of them did, and were killed by the destroying angel. These things happened to them as examples, and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out, so that you can stand up under it. Therefore, my dear friends, flee from idolatry. I speak to sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I say. Is not the cup of thanksgiving for which we give thanks a participation in the blood of Christ? And is not the bread that we break a participation in the body of Christ? Because there is one loaf, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one loaf. Consider the people of Israel. Do not those who eat the sacrifices participate in the altar? Do I mean then that a sacrifice offered to an idol is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, but the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons, not to God. And I do not want you to be participants with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons too. You cannot have a part in both the Lord's table and the table of demons. Are we trying to arouse the Lord's jealousy? Are we stronger than He? Everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible, but not everything is constructive. Nobody should seek his own good, but the good of others. Eat anything sold in the meat market without raising questions of conscience, for the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. If some unbeliever invites you to a meal and you want to go, eat whatever is put before you without raising questions of conscience. But if anyone says to you, "This has been offered in sacrifice," then do not eat it, both for the sake of the man who told you and for conscience sake. The other man's conscience, I mean, not yours. For why should my freedom be judged by another's conscience? If I take part in the meal with thankfulness, why am I denounced because of something I thank God for? So, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews, Greeks, or the Church of God, even as I try to please everybody in every way. For I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that they may be saved. Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ.